Hey, guess who's back in the house for part 2, Seaira Baker. That wasn't very good. In this episode, in part 2, Seaira talks to us about MMIWG, murdered and missing Indigenous women, and how a lot of that has to do with the LGBTQ plus community. We also talk about the land back movement that is happening within Canada right now, so there's a lot to learn. And Seaira also talks to us about some of the major lessons that she's learned in her life and has had to overcome and where she is going. So it's super exciting, can't wait to share this with you guys. I learned so much, so you're gonna learn so much. How did your community accept your sexuality?
That's a huge question, because I wouldn't say that it's like a
unknown thing.
Well, like in my family, I've always been accepted, just like how I am and how I express myself. And then in terms of like my community, it's not something I'm just gonna like stand up on my res and be like, hey, everyone,
I'm queer! I'm a black queer woman!
But I guess this is kind of my moment having this interview, so
yeah.
Hi!
This is me!
I think for me, it's about having those conversations with like our queer, trans, and two-spirit leaders in my nation and my cousins and my family members about those things, and just feeling out and learning from and being inspired by the work that they're doing and the incredible work that they're doing as well. And I feel like so protected and safe in my community. Yeah. So I think more that's the acceptance I think has already been established. So I'm really grateful that I'm just experiencing those spaces that my aunties and so on have been developing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. First of all, I want everybody to know that, and Seaira already said this, but each nation or territory has different rules and regulations that they follow. I don't know if you call it rules or regulations, but am I correct?
I would say
you want to say
protocols, cultural teachings.
Protocols and cultural teachings. So whenever I ask a question to Seaira, it's very specific to the Squamish Nation. Correct?
Yes, and even more so specific to me personally. Like
to Seaira personally.
I know for a fact that my experience has been really positive, like all things considered, other than dealing with like really patriarchal, idiotic men. But let's ignore that. Outside of my community. But I know for a fact that the same or similar journey has been very difficult for a lot of my cousins or relatives or just other people in my nation or other neighboring nations as well. For me, like I'm really grateful I'm experiencing the positive effects of all the work that has been built up until now. And I recognize that that's because of a lot of hard work and a lot of hardship. There's still spaces in my nation that are struggling and not 100%. Supportive, so.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Our stories are very unique towards us, and we can't speak for everybody, but you're doing the best that you can. You speak for your nation too. Let's talk about your face. Your makeup, zoom in. Are you seeing this?
Last October, I started something called a Decolonize Your Closet challenge, where I decided to take all of my clothes, all my beauty products that are non-Indigenous, and I donated them. Now my closet is entirely Indigenous. Today, I decided to just support two-spirit artists. I'm wearing earrings by Morgan Asoyef. I'm wearing a dress by Tyler Jacobs. My makeup, I'm kind of dancing that line between like Indigenous futurism and ancestral and tradition and protocol, and that's kind of how I always feel I am. Like I'm always figuring out where I am in all these conversations. As much as it's like Indigenous futurist, is also traditional sacred markings. I represent certain prayers that we do when we're putting our prayer marks on our face, and they help me speak with a good heart and see with good eyes and hear and interact with the world in a good way.
Wow. That's amazing. I love that you decolonize your closet and have a lot more depth and meaning to like what you wear every single day and how you are viewed in this world. You're a big advocate in the Indigenous community and you're always fighting the fight. So it's beautiful to see that you really take so much time to put into your look and your aesthetic, and then all your like makeup on your face that has so much meaning behind it. I love that. And do you want to?
Yeah. So I have these incredible purses.
They're amazing.
By Two-Spirit Cree artist Morgan Whitehead. Morgan paints and hand paints on different vintage found purses. He upcycles everything he finds. I remember we were having a talk and I was like, oh, like, what's the inspiration behind your work? He's like, well, like, it's just kind of what I feel and like what I love expressing. I was like, well, like, do you think it has something to do with like Two-Spirit? Like, you always have these two ancestors. And he said, yeah, they're ancestors. I'm always painting ancestors. And like, you always have two sitting with each other. He's like, oh, I think you're right. That's
wow. That's so interesting.
So I love supporting his work. It really speaks to that like Two-Spirit nature and just having just the thinking that like these ancestors are coming through in his work and they're always here and like watching over us and helping us and ensuring that we're safe and protected. And
they're gorgeous. They're so gorgeous. I will link him below.
This is a jacket that was bought for me by an abusive ex. This was the last piece that he'd ever bought me. It was very much a relationship around being like owned and possessed. So like a lot of getting rid of it or gifting it was about like releasing that. Yeah. Well, why don't I just reclaim this? Like, why don't I ask Morgan to like paint these like really powerful messages like I am the sacred fire, land back, and like having the ancestors. And to me this is like not only like what's
so gorgeous,
it's stunning, like I'm so happy with it. And when I wear it, it just reminds me not only of like getting through this abusive relationship and working through like not giving away my power anymore, but it's such a powerful message as well for like, we're in an abusive relationship with the federal government. We're in an abusive relationship with white supremacy and colonization. Like, not only are we reclaiming ourselves from these like very colonial patriarchal constructs, but we're also reclaiming the land and our ancestral practices and who we are as people.
Power in the message, people. That's gorgeous. Good. I love that. Seaira, you are powerful a lot. Okay, so let's talk about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in the LGBTQ plus community.
So the missing and murdered Indigenous women crisis in Canada and across Turtle Island, where Indigenous women are experiencing genocide at incredibly high rates because of the colonial, federal, and provincial governments, as well as systemic racism and white supremacy in Canada, or sorry, what is currently known as Canada. We're going to change that.
Yeah, we are.
And MMIW is obviously the main hashtag and main place to learn about the MMIW crisis, and it's known as MMIW or MMIWG, women and girls. And obviously that focuses heavily on women and girls, when obviously this crisis and this genocide is highly affecting LGBTQ2 plus people and Indigenous people. As much as the overhead is MMIW, like this is affecting queer and Two-Spirit and trans and non-binary people at like horrible rates. I'm one of the choreographers for Butterflies in Spirit, the founder being Lorelei Williams, and Butterflies in Spirit, we dance to raise awareness for MMIW. We're figuring out ways to ensure that LGBTQ2+ feel more seen and heard in these conversations. The focus seems to be on women, but I know it's way bigger than that, and the conversation is way bigger than that.
Yeah. I'm going to leave a lot of links below, or a specific link, so you can read a little bit more up on the issues that are happening in Canada. To dive into it a little bit, why is this such a big genocide? Like, why is it happening? What is the government doing about it? And why is the movement so strong?
So if we had 3 hours, I could teach an entire workshop on colonial history.
Do 3 minutes quickly.
In the 3-minute version, ultimately, Canada is an illegal occupation on unceded and unsurrendered territories. And even in treaty territories, Canada is going back on its word and essentially breaking all of its promises with Indigenous people across Canada. The reason for this is because colonization requires Indigenous land, and it requires Indigenous land to not be contested by its Indigenous inhabitants. The best way to ensure that its Indigenous inhabitants aren't contesting land is by killing them. Systemically, there's 5 definitions by the United Nations on what defines genocide, and all of those are being experienced right now. We are systematically coming up against barriers that are genuinely built and meant to kill us and ensure that we're not here, because we are the ancestral leadership and governance on these territories. We are the ancestral title and rights holders of these territories. Canada does not have claim to these lands or these territories. All the buildings, infrastructure, industries that you see here are illegally occupying our territories. And we are the ancestral and rightful leaders, and we should be the ones that people are coming to ask, like, what do you want in these lands? Like, how should we be living in right relation to you and your people? And this is such a huge issue, and this is a lot of where my work is based in, is in decolonizing cities, decolonizing systems of oppression, and reinstating ancestral governance and ancestral laws. So you can check out my work. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, please do.
And it's really important to me that we are seen as Indigenous and sovereign, that we are seen as Indigenous sovereign peoples, and we have sovereign Indigenous bodies, and those sovereign Indigenous bodies' rights and title need to be respected, not only from our bodies, but to the land that we protect and that we are stewards of. And ensuring that you are in right relation to those relationships and those narratives is imperative, and being in right relation to the truth and to the true histories and the true current events that are happening here will ultimately decide where you stand in colonization as we continue in this occupation by what is currently known as Canada.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for opening up about that. I know that it's not something easy to talk about for you. There's a lot of trauma from the past and colonization and what has happened on these unceded territories. So thank you for opening up about that. And yes, please do check out Seaira's work. She is fighting the fight every single day, and it's a big fight. And there's a lot of depth and hardship that happens to you that you have to face every single day. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you.
Just before we close, I really appreciate that this conversation came, I think it's been like a year now. I was over here hanging out with you and Ari, and I just had like a huge mental breakdown for like, I think it was like half an hour.
Yeah.
And I just like went off and was talking about all this stuff, and I think that's kind of the first time you really started hearing about all of this.
It was the first time coming from the Caribbean and not really knowing a lot about the history of Indigenous people in Canada. That was my first time, and yeah, you were very, very, very upset, and I learned a lot.
So I really appreciate that instead of just like seeing me upset and being like, oh, like you're actually like taking the steps, like you've done research, you've like invited me to this interview, and like you're continually learning, and like I really appreciate that. And
Thank
like
you.
it's just so nice that, and it's true, like I have done a lot of work, and I continually do a lot of work to be able to have these conversations without getting upset. And sometimes it's too much, and you don't see the like the mental breakdowns and like how hard this is. And it's called emotional labor for a reason. It literally feels like labor. So to feel supported by you in like that space, as well as in like getting the message out and doing what we can. And even though I'm not front lines and I'm doing a lot of work in systems and decolonizing different systemic oppressions through design, landscape, architecture, urban planning, policy, like it's really nice to be supported and to know that that there's people out there willing to learn and really like really truly wanting to like ensure that they have the truth and that they're working in the truth and wanting to support Indigenous sovereignty.
Well, I have so much more to learn, and every single time this girl comes over, she blows my mind. I learn so much more, and it just proves to me that there is so much lack of education in Indigenous history that Canada needs to, or what is called Canada, needs to take action towards and like really start understanding that this is unceded territory and what has happened here. You know, so I can't wait to learn more from you. Let's talk about the land back movement.
That's a very good segue. Like Indigenous sovereignty and land back. So, you know how there's always a hashtag for a movement? Like our movement is land back, and you saw it painted on my jacket, and it's something that we feel very strongly is it's really important that we as Indigenous people, as sovereign Indigenous people, have agency over our own territories again, because in the past 300 years, Western colonization and capitalism is destroying the planet and is creating essentially apocalyptic conditions. We've had unprecedented biodiversity die out. The planet is in complete crisis politically, socially, geographically, climate-wise, so on and so forth. And we're even experiencing a pandemic, which can be exacerbated by climate change. And But when you think about it, like Indigenous people, we protect over 80% of the different natural biomasses on Earth. And our territories are some of the most rich and biodiverse areas on the planet. And those territories that we've been upkeeping, at least in my family, for over 809 generations, which is over 16,000 to 80,000 years old, that my family's been living here, have been making sure that the environment is in harmony and we're in right relation to the environment so that we can sustain life on this planet. And Western society and colonization is the opposite of that. It's a system based on death, it's a system based on hierarchies, and it's a system based on oppression. And ensuring that Indigenous people are having the power and agency to be good stewards and hosts of our lands again is imperative to all of these intersectional issues.
And a lot of the frontline people are from the LGBTQ plus community.
It's just so inspiring, and to see like this rainbow of people coming together and fighting the good fight, and really sitting strong in our power, and really sitting strong in our narratives, and sitting strong in who we are.
I think it's very good perspective to see. It's just like these kids that are, or youth that are fighting the fight, it's like they already have a lot of fighting for like their sexuality, their identity, or who they are naturally, and then they're also fighting for their land and fighting for what they believe in and fighting for their community. So it's so powerful seeing that much power at the front line, you know?
Yeah, completely.
Through your life, what is the biggest lesson that you've learned and that you live by?
Living a life like my ancestors is not only completely possible, but is precedented by over 809 generations of my ancestors being complete badasses. So there's no reason why I can't live a life of ancestry and power, just like my elders have.
I love that power! When you're dealing with hardship in life, how do you take care of your mental health?
I'm very fortunate. I've often had access to counseling and a lot of different healing resources. I think something that I learned is oftentimes I'm the cause of my own suffering. As much as it's really easy to point to colonization as the reason for all things horrible and bad, I know I'm able to create a lot of positivity, and I know I'm able to create a lot of change, making sure that I'm always checking myself and always checking when I'm acting entitled or overly privileged or it's not my place. Really just recognizing when it's myself causing my own stuff and doing, it's called like shadow work in certain circles. So like making sure I'm always like checking my shadow and always checking my ego, and just being always like really hypercritical of what I'm doing and creating, and then just like always trying to strip that back and be just my true self, like that little kid that my dad supported that was just fluid and running around and having a great time.
No, I think what you said was just great awareness for everybody, you know, that we all do need to check ourselves and what are we doing destructive to ourselves, you know? So I love that. I think that's super powerful. What do you think are the next steps for inclusion for the LGBTQ plus community?
Like I said, like I'm really fortunate to really experience the positive effects of what already has been done, and really trying to think about like what's my responsibilities to keep moving things forward. And like these movements didn't just begin like this year, like they've been ongoing for years. 100%. And we're often up against colonization and white supremacy and dealing with all these different blocks and fears on the colonial side as to transformation. And for me, I think as much as like we're doing all this work, we're like fighting the good fight, like at a certain point, I really want the people on the other side of the conversation, like the people who have fear and hatred in their hearts, to really address their own shadows and work towards transformation. And transformation is so powerful. And like, we're going to create this incredible society with these incredible rainbow roads and decolonized cities and these Indigenous, Black, Afro-Indigenous queer futures. And I want the people that are really struggling with that and really blocking that to go through a period of transformation, to not be afraid of those futures anymore.
Amen to that. Education is key, and I completely agree with you. I think it needs to start with the people that have so much hate in their hearts. Is there one last thing you want to say to anybody that's watching?
Land back.
Great. And that's it.
That's it. Thank you.
I'm done. I just want to say thank you so much for always coming over here and educating me and allowing me to ask questions that you never make me feel like are dumb or silly, or you just allow me to ask questions and you don't judge me and you just open up about. So you've taught me so much in my life, and you've taught me so much just having this conversation here with you. So I respect you a lot, and I'm so grateful and appreciative that you're in my life and you're able to come on here and share your story too. So thank you so much, Seaira. Thank you. But that's everything. So I'm gonna leave a bunch of links below. Seaira's gonna give me a bunch of research too, so you can go and do some reading, educate yourself on a lot of things. Go follow Seaira and her journey too. But that's everything for this week. All right, guys, thank you for watching. Ciao for now. Oh my gosh, what an amazing episode. Am I wrong? Thank you, Seaira, for coming on here and sharing your story. I appreciate you so much. And thank you guys for tuning in on every single episode, every single week. Tune back in next week for a brand new story. I love you guys. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment, and leave some love. Okay, ciao for now.